and I am here to talk to you about running Umbraco on Linux for fun and potentially profit. One quick disclaimer in all of this. I'm not a Linux expert. I have used Linux on and off for many years, but only in a purely amateur way, never as a professional. I couldn't go to the Linux Olympics, for example. I'm not a security expert. All the stuff I've done over here is just as my own kind of tinkering. I've done it through reading the docs, lots of blogs. People have done a great amount of work online, and I've asked for help for a lot of people, which have helped me get to this point. This is a very much kind of in progress and changing landscape right now, and I'd love to kind of continue the conversation afterwards. So if you do want to get in touch, my Twitter is there, and I'm online on Twitter probably the most. So just give me a shout. Okay, what are we trying to do over here? We're basically trying to make it easier for people to collaborate, to work together. We're removing barriers. We're putting that are normally in place on a traditional .NET environment, where you had to have Windows, you have to host it on IIS, you have to pay license fees. Projects are becoming more and more collaborative and open. Services are moving all over the place. So this is really the new world that we have to all adapt to live in, adapt or die, basically. Sometimes people use Macs. Sometimes people prefer Linux. Most people prefer Macs or Windows, but we don't want to put a barrier in place for people who, to be part of the team and to contribute in a meaningful way. And then on the server side of things, on the hosting side of things, if you have to stand up infrastructure just for the website, but maybe the application that you're a part of, or the group that you're a part of, has other applications and services that also run on Linux, for example, you have to double your hosting. Why not? Maybe there's opportunities to group them together and put them into a single shared hosting environment. We're cheaper potentially. Windows has always had licensing costs. That is par for the course. That unlikely to change in the future, certainly on the enterprise scale. By moving on to an operating system without that, you haven't got that. Linux, by its very nature, tends to be faster. You don't have a UI on servers. You don't have images and windows to draw. There's less between your code and the actual CPU, so your code has less to get in the way of it. It can run faster. Secure, that's a questionable one. You can't automatically say just because it's on Linux it is more secure. Windows does tend to be targeted more because that's where most individuals use on their day-to-day basis, and it's a bigger kind of a pool of potential targets, and for that reason Windows tends to get attacked more, but Linux is no more or less secure than Mac or Windows. They're all operating systems. They all have vulnerabilities, but it's about how quickly they're patched and how quickly they're fixed, and what the community is like, and that's one big thing about Linux is it's an open community. The entire operating system stack and most of the tools that are on there are open source. If you want to get involved, you can. I think at present there are something like 400 active distributions in Linux that are currently being developed right now. So there's a huge amount of choice out there. Okay, the scenario that I've put together is effectively a small team working together. We've got multiple user devices, Windows machines, Linux machines, Mac machines, and then we have servers, there's a shared database, and then we have a Windows web server and a Linux web server. The Windows and Linux web servers are there really only as a comparison. The way I'm running all of this for this particular demo is on hypervisor as virtual machines, but all of this applies equally well if you're in the cloud. It's literally there's no difference at all. It's exactly the same. And yeah, the specific scenario that we're going to tackle is, we've got an existing project, was built on Windows, and a new dev comes into the team, but they have a Mac machine or a Linux machine. It doesn't matter what at this point in time, another operating system machine, and they'd like to contribute to the project. Okay. So what's on that machine? What could that machine look like? Well, with the version, and this all obviously only applies to .NET 5 and the Umbraco 9 application. But what are you going to need? You're going to need the SDK, obviously. You're going to need an IDE of choice. There is a huge choice out there right now. Visual Studio Code is probably the most popular, but full-on Visual Studio for Windows is there, and Mac, and Visual Studio 2022 is announced and will be out, I think, in November as a release candidate, and full release next year. JetBrains Rider is a licensed product, but it's it's paid, but it runs on Windows, Mac, Linux, fridges everywhere. And for the truly masochistic among you, VI as Vi, I don't even know how you say it, as terminal. I am actually scared of Vi, and every time I get stuck in Vi, I basically have to restart my machine to get out. It's a real problem. The database that we have in this scenario, well, for the dev environment, we have several options. If you're on Windows, the traditional route has always been SQL Server Express. That since SQL Server 17, 2017, I should say, that does also run on Linux. So if you're running on Linux, you could run full-on SQL Server Express natively on your machine. But say you're on a Mac, that's not possible. SQL Server and Docker is an option too. And a few days ago, I think Warren Buckley released an excellent video on the community YouTube channel. So go check that out, which shows you how to run SQL Server and Docker on Mac. Further options are, if you've got the resources for it, you could fire up a virtual machine, or the failover for that is you could also run it on a local network, and connect to it. But then obviously then you have to be on the network in order to work, and all kinds of hassle. We don't want to be tied to a network so that you can do your work. So first demo time. So this is the site that we're going to be working on. It's intentionally hideous. I don't know how well you can see this, by the way, but there's nothing to really see over here. It's configured with a host name. It is running on one of my virtual servers, and it's all hooked up. There's an Umbraco backend. You can see it. I can go in there and I can make publish it, just so you can see that this isn't just a purely static site. There you go. So this is the site we're going to be working on, and so the new developers joining the team, and we'd like to make some changes to that site. So let's get his environment up and running. Okay, so he's going to come in, and here we are. So I'm going to use this virtual machine to model that. Oops, I should have closed all of these. So we're starting from a clean slate. Pretend you didn't see any of this. Nothing to see here, folks. Okay, so I'm going to just close this terminal window. Let's start again. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clone the repository. Now I'm going to clone the repository from this terminal simply because I can copy and paste the URL, because I don't want to have to do it from in here. It would be exactly the same as if I ran it from that terminal. Okay, I'm now going to clone the repository. Oops. Left the old one there. Right, I'm now going to clone the repository inside here on this dev machine. Okay, so that's now cloned. Now I have a choice. I've got both Rider and Visual Studio Code installed. If you want some help getting these tools set up, there's plenty of help online, or just reach out and give me a shout. Let's do it with Visual Studio Code first of all. So here's my documents folder. Umbraco Linux. Okay, now I need a database to work with. I have already installed in this machine Docker, and I have set up a Docker container which has the database inside there. So oops, fat finger. So you can see this Docker is currently running right now, just because I have a limited amount of time for this demo. Yeah, okay, so we have a repository. I cloned it, and I can now run Visual Studio Code. Now this is this is a standard Umbraco installation, as you can see. It's set up with Models Builder with generated models. It's got the production app settings over here. Obviously, this is not good practice to leave production code inside there, but that's fine for this instance. And I've got a specific dev settings, which basically connects to my local Docker database. So I should now, just to verify it's not currently working, this should die. Okay, so yeah, it's not working. So I should be able to come in here. Hit .NET run. Okay, and the site is now up. So if I come back in here, I should have a fully working Umbraco installation. So this is me as a dev, come in, and I have a full environment that's not dependent on anything in the rest of the network. I can work, do whatever changes I need to, resume, do whatever make whatever dev changes I need, carry on. This is an entirely local database. You can see that it's got a different H1 over there. I could make my changes, commit them, push them up to source control, work as a normal team would do. Okay, so back to our the center view. Oops, gone too far. Okay, so that's the dev, the kind of dev tooling. If I come back here, so that's all the stuff that an individual use, not dependent on any part of the network, can work wherever they want to, remotely, locally, whatever. So then we go to the server side of things. Okay, so what do you need on a Windows server or a Linux server to run .NET 5 effectively? The tooling is very similar. You still need the you don't need the SDK, you need the runtime. I use OpenSSH to get in and out simply because that will make it easier. I don't need to install a UI on my production environment, but I can do. Okay, then the recommendation is when you are hosting .NET Core, you wouldn't normally expose Kestrel to the outside, to the web at large. You'd put it behind a reverse proxy. You could use either Nginx or Apache. Both are available to you. I've used Nginx with this particular example. And then one other thing you need to do when you set that up, and there are there's articles on the Microsoft website to basically go through and kind of get through the setup. So if you have any trouble, I can tweet these links out. They're really helpful. You need to set up the header forward middleware. So let me open up Visual Studio here. And all that is in your startup class, you have this middleware, which basically will receive requests from the proxy and then run it. No, I'm not going to actually run it over here because this is local. And then, yeah, so let's look at our server and how that's set up. So that's, again, what's running behind this site over here. This site, again, as you can see, is still active, still running. Nothing's really changed inside here. So how are we for time? 15 minutes, not bad, getting there. Virtual machine. Yep, okay, so this is my server machine. In this instance, I have install the UI. You wouldn't normally, because the UI is just resources that you wouldn't want to run on the server. But in this instance, I have got it, just so that it's make it easier to just kind of demonstrate and look around stuff. But there's not an awful lot to see over here. Effectively, you have the website is running in a folder on this machine called var root and Umbraco. So this is the live Umbraco folder. And then Nginx sits in front of this and serves requests over here. So this will actually respond on this machine to localhost 5000, because it's listening to port 5000. That's what's configured by default on .NET Core for Umbraco. But port 5000 is obviously not what the external website's listening on. That's just port 80 or port 443 if you do configure SSL, which I have not. The Nginx configuration, I'll just bring that up. Sorry, I've got so many windows in this demo. So the Nginx configuration is effectively you set the server up. Now you'd want Nginx to run as a service, and then you configure a server to effectively forward any requests from specific domain names to a specific IP address on listening on a port. So you could have multiple sites listening on different ports, responding to different domain names. And that effectively has us on a live website. Now I can demonstrate that that's actually a live website and not just me pretending it's a live website when I can find my virtual machine. So I'm going to kill the service now. Okay. So this is no longer running. The site has stopped. And on here, it will also have stopped. I get a bad gateway response because Nginx hasn't been configured to default to a friendly message, which you can. And then I can come back in here, run the site again. When it spins up, we have back again and back again. Yay, happy dance. Right. Wait for time. Cool. Right. So that effectively completes this scenario. Forgive me, it is a very quick scenario. There was a lot of setup required to get this point, and 30 minutes just isn't enough to go through all of it. But I will be writing an article about this, and there'll be a GitHub repository. So if you want to try this yourself, yeah, please do. I would be very interested in the results. So, performance is the next question. Now, why would you go through all this effort? Obviously, the collaborative side of things is great. Being able to share services and reuse services is great. But the common conception is Linux is generally faster than Windows. Now, bearing in mind several very heavy caveats, this is beta software. There is still lots of work to be done. This is the setup that I have. My 3 machines are, running on reasonable resources. So the database has got 8 gigs of RAM, SSD, 12 threads, and so do both the Windows and web machines. And I've run some performance testing. There's a .NET 5 tool. It's open source. It's called Netling. It's a really great tool. I would encourage you to try it. Just to do load testing on local environments or sites. And you'll see something curious over here. You'll see that Windows actually, in this instance, beats Linux by a fairly hefty margin. And that surprised me. I came into this whole talk thinking there's no way Windows will be faster than Linux. The whole point of all of this is that Linux is going to be way faster than Linux, and it'll be fantastic. Now, bear in mind, I do have the UI running on Linux, so all the Windows the Windows system is there. That's sucking up resources, but the hardware is identical otherwise. Besides that, there's nothing else kind of running there. Linux is running Nginx as a proxy, but the Windows is running IIS as a proxy. So both of those have a proxy in front of the Kestrel server. So that's kind of the same. This surprised me a little bit. I obviously haven't got the chance to test this again. So, I'd be very curious if anyone else managed to replicate this or had similar experiences. This isn't what I expected to happen. So, yeah, this is a great point for conversation. But you can see on fairly kind of mediocre hardware, I was able to handle 10,000 requests per second. That's in itself astonishing. Being able to handle on an Umbraco site, hitting the database, hitting the cache, rendering pages, 10,000 requests per second, even on Windows. That's so much faster than anything that Umbraco 8 would be able to do. An equivalent machine. Each response, the median was not 6.99 milliseconds. Again, tiny site. But yeah, some really very impressive performance numbers. So, a massive high five rock to the core team on that. They've done fantastic work. There's a lot more you could do. I've only scratched the surface. I haven't configured the proxy for SSL. You see, it only responded to port 80. I didn't configure Kestrel as a service, so you could configure Kestrel as a service inside Linux, so it automatically starts when the system runs up. There's lots of security things you could do to harden Linux. This is not an exhaustive list, but never run root if you're just looking around. There's services called fail to ban, which basically block IP addresses if they try and brute force your system, force SSH for all your connections into the system, so firewall, automatic updates, logging, that's a big thing. Nginx logs internally, but it isn't configured to log Kestrel by default. So if you want to get your logs from your application itself, what would traditionally be written to the IIS log, you have to set that up inside Linux, and there are steps to do, which I didn't have time to do. I would definitely encourage you to try this for yourself. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this. You don't need a lot. You could try it on a virtual machine on hardware that you have on your desktop. Docker, again, fantastic. And there's a really big conversation around kind of Docker because I've used Docker in this instance for the database, but you could very easily use Docker to host the website as well. In a production environment, or an Azure database, or a virtual machine, or physical a dedicated machine, or whatever, running native SQL Server, and then Docker for your website. And that is something that I will be doing some more experimenting on in the future. So, keep an eye on my blogs and GitHub and whatever for that. Raspberry Pi, again, I'm a massive fan. If you know me from the community, I've done a few talks about Raspberry Pis already. So, it's a really cheap, great way of doing it in a standalone way, and inexpensive, and it doesn't obviously affect your hardware. Or if you have an old laptop lying around, you could boot Linux onto it. Even an older distro of Linux, Ubuntu 16 is, I think, still in long-term support, but because of the nature of it, a lot of these tools will run on quite old distros. Or if you don't want to, replace the main operating system, boot from a USB, or there's always, cloud services, Amazon, Azure, or just get some free cheap hosting. There's loads already working in version 9. I'm sure there's been lots of other talks about this, so I don't necessarily need to rehash all of this. Xamarin's already supported. Models Builder, as I say, I configured mine to kind of generate models in files as opposed to what was previously Pure Live, but I can't remember what the new one is. you sync the amazing package, which has won, best package overall, and very well deserved to Kevin for that one. The doc type creator is not far away. Contentment is not far away. Uskind is in development, and I believe also Plumber is in development and not far away from beta 2. So packages are coming. It's a great time to jump on and try version 9, and I'm actually quite a lot early. So I don't know if there's anything else that I could show you. Don't know if I've even got the chat open anymore. No, I haven't got anything else to show you. Thank you very much. I'm just going to have to end it 5 minutes early. So thank you.